Welcome, everybody, to the Cover 2 podcast. I am Nick Nenad.
And I'm Jared Smith.
And today we have another power-packed show for you guys today to end what has been crazy, terrible 2020, but sports-wise has still been thoroughly entertaining. A lot of football on this podcast today, but plenty to talk about. Obviously, we are in week 17 now of the NFL season, and at week 17, like we've never seen it before. There are so many playoff spots on the line, so many meaningful games. You don't see this a lot in week 17. Not a lot of teams taking games off. I think there's probably only like one or two. Realistically, maybe you see quarterbacks and star players sitting. So very interesting. And then, of course, January 1st, yes, it's already here. January 1st, 2021, the College Football Playoff Semifinals. We will get into that a little bit later. At the end of the podcast, Jared and I will explain to you our favorite moment of the year 2020 in the world of sports. But Jared, to start off the podcast, we always give just a thought on our mind that's something about that we're not going to talk about in the podcast. So take it away.
Yeah, my thought is about the other basketball team in the NBA, in LA, sorry. And that is the Clippers. Nick's team, as everyone knows, and everyone knows that I'm a Lakers fan. So this is a big laugher for me, and I wish Nick was wearing some Clippers gear today because I could roast him even more. But Nick, just in case you didn't see yesterday, your Clippers going up against the Dallas Mavericks were down in the first half by 50 points. I didn't say 15. I said 55-0, a 50 burger in the first half.
Jared, I thought it was a malfunction of my ESPN app.
No, your app is working just fine, man. The Wi-Fi is good. I know you got good internet. I know you got good Wi-Fi. Everything is working good. That was real. We saw like John Morant, a bunch of other NBA stars and athletes went on Twitter and kind of expressed, how they felt about it because you just don't see a professional basketball team get whooped like that, especially in the first half. Now, the Clippers didn't have Kawhi Leonard, but still, you're telling me that with Paul George and the rest of the players that they have on that team, like they have a good roster, right? They're supposed to have one of the best rosters, according to you, in the entire NBA. Take out Kawhi Leonard. Sorry. So I just wanted to come here and basically just see your face and see your reaction to the fact that your team got whooped. I mean, Paul George, he just got paid like $200 million, right? He's supposed to be like the all-star. So without Kawhi Leonard, Paul George is still supposed to be able to lead his team and actually keep them competitive. And he couldn't even do that. In the first half, he was 4 for 12 from the field and 0 for 6 on threes. I mean,
Jared, I gotta say this.
Anything from you on this?
I gotta say this. Okay, this team is starting to hurt my feelings. They hurt my feelings last season in the playoffs. But man, why did the Clippers have to do this, Jared? Why do they just not have to be chill? When they lose, it's just not chill at all, right? It's completely collapse against the Nuggets. The top players have 8 points. You don't see this with other teams. Okay, the Clippers used to do this. They were the team that came back against the Warriors, a full-strength Warriors with Kevin Durant, and only with Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams as their best players. What has happened?
I'll tell you what happened. Here's what they did. They exerted all of their energy into their first game when they played the Lakers. And guess what happened? They won. Good for them. It's the first game of the season. Guess what they did last NBA season in the first game of the season? They beat the Lakers, right? Guess what happened? Lakers ended up winning the championship.
I'll say this.
It's they got so hyped to play the NBA champions and prove that last year was a fluke. Losing the series to the Nuggets was an aberration, all that stuff. And they came out and they played well against the Lakers in game 1. And it's they emptied the entire tank. They've got nothing left. I mean, Kawhi Leonard already load management, or is he seriously hurt? 3 games in.
Jared, you saw his injury on Christmas Day. Come on, let's not talk. We know it's not load management. He got an MMA elbow to the eye on Christmas Day. But I'll say this, okay? Clippers lost or were down by 50 and lost by like 75, whatever it was in this game. But Jared, you know what's been weird about this NBA season? There's been a lot of blowouts so far. So I think you are truly seeing the lack of preseason, the lack of training camp, and some teams definitely getting affected by that short layoff. I think it was like normally they'd have like a month and a half longer. You know, you're seeing a lot of these teams that like at the Clippers, you know, beat down the Nuggets on opening day, but like then get lose to the Mavericks, and the Lakers lost to the Clippers by a bunch on opening day, and the Clippers lose. Like it's weird. Like this NBA season starting out very, very strange. I'm excited to see like near the end of the season or midway through the season how teams look. It's very, very hard to judge teams right now. But I'm going to switch topics really quickly to my thought of the day, really quickly. Some interesting news coming out of the MLB. We have our first big transactions of the MLB winter season. Normally, we'd have all the GMs and owners and head coaches, or excuse me, managers at a hotel somewhere in Florida or Las Vegas or Arizona or San Diego at the winter meetings. You couldn't have that this year, so everything's been virtual with COVID and all that stuff. But we finally had a big transaction. It's Blake Snell. Yes, that's the same Blake Snell that Kevin Cass took out to make this team the world champions right here. He has been traded to one of the Dodgers' rival teams, the San Diego Padres. Jared, I know you might be a little fair weather baseball fan, but you know that the Padres have had a lack of pitching for a long time, and this is a big for them. Other news I wanted to push across, maybe if this hasn't happened yet, or it has happened by the time this podcast gets released, Darvish is supposed to go to the Padres as well. They're going have a deal with the Cubs apparently to get Darvish, who was one of the Cy Young nominees last year. So the Padres, they're making that run. They understand how good the Dodgers are, and they understand how good some of these top teams are. You really need to load up that pitching. And they already have the hitting with Tatis and Machado. So exciting stuff there in San Diego. But Jared, we know who number one is in the NL West. We know who the NL West champs are, and that's my Dodgers. So should be interesting. I always love when a rival steps it up. I'm sure we just talked about Lakers and Clippers. I'm sure you enjoy beating the Clippers or at least having bragging rights over a good team, right? So very similar with us and the Padres. They've always been the little brother in town in Southern California, realistically, whereas the Dodgers, they half-pack Petco Park when there were fans allowed and stuff like that. So very, very interesting stuff. But Jared, let's get to the NFL like we usually do on this podcast. Big news today. Dwayne Haskins is not the quarterback of the Washington football team anymore, nor is he a member of the organization. Jared, when you first heard about this, what are your thoughts?
Listen, I mean, we can joke around and sit here and say, obviously he made a mistake, right? Was caught at a strip club or somewhere where strippers were present, right? And he was at a party and he wasn't wearing a mask. Neither was anyone that was around him. So obviously he made a bonehead move. Knowing, number one, you are a professional athlete. People know who you are. Everyone's got cameras on their phones now. So very easy for them to just, boom, take a picture of you, post it on the internet, and there you go. Now, if Dwayne Haskins was playing well on the field, Dwayne Haskins would still be a member of this Washington football team right now. He may not be the starting quarterback going into week 17, because if I'm not mistaken, Alex Smith is supposed to come back and take over that starting role. But Dwayne Haskins would at least be on the team. But because he's played so poorly, and everyone's like, well, it's only his second year. He just got drafted last year. He's still young. He still needs to develop. That is true. But a part of the development is showing up on time to work, right? Being there, or especially if you are named the captain like he was at the beginning of this year. His teammates named him a captain, right? That means you should be like one of the first ones in the building and one of the last ones out, right? That's one of the old sayings, right? He needs to be the leader and basically lead by example. And obviously going to a strip club and not wearing your mask and potentially putting the rest of your organization at risk is not a leader type quality. And let's also remember, head coach Ron Rivera, he just finished getting over all of his chemotherapy, right? He was going through having cancer. And so as a starting quarterback and as the quote unquote captain of your team, you're going to go and potentially put yourself in the position to get COVID and then think that you're going to, go into the locker room or something and interact with your head coach. When you're a head coach, potentially could be more compromised than other people. So I just think it was a very selfish move by him. And this show, the NFL, we've said this on this show before, the NFL stands for not for long. And Dwayne Haskins just found that out in a real harsh way. So, I think he's talented, and I'm sure that he will get another look from another team in the NFL. But I think he really needs time to sit behind a veteran quarterback and learn how to be a professional quarterback himself, because he was kind of thrust into a starting position, wasn't ready for it, and hasn't been able to actually mature and grow not only as a quarterback, but I think as a man. So I think he's got a lot of things that he needs to fix, not only on the field, but off the field as well. And listen, Ron Rivera is coming in. He didn't draft him, Dwayne Haskins, right? He came in this year. So he was, given Dwayne Haskins. And obviously it just didn't work out. So I'm not surprised, but I hope this is more of a learning moment for Dwayne Haskins and he gets another opportunity.
Yeah, I'm all up for second chances, but the one thing about Dwayne Haskins is he's had a bunch of chances here. This is not just his first mistake. This isn't, for example, his Lou Williams mistake, right? Lou Williams went to the strip club. Argue whatever you want about what he did at that strip club or what he says he did, but nonetheless, he went to a strip club in the middle of a pandemic while he's supposed to be in the bubble, and he was allowed to leave the bubble for reasons that
he was getting some wings. Leave the guy alone.
Yeah, but so Lou Williams didn't have a past of doing that. It was a mistake he made, and he was forgiven, and most people don't really care about it anymore. Dwayne Haskins, coming out of Ohio State, he had character issues. Jerry, we can remember him on draft night kind of having that disgusted look on his face when it was Washington that drafted him and not like, say, the New York Giants or somebody else. I believe he fell like number 15, right? And I'm all for players caring about dropping in the draft, but you should be excited when you get drafted. Like
by your hometown team. He's also from the Washington area.
Good point. Exactly. So you have those two things. Then if you remember, Jared, I believe it was last year, there was a time where he didn't go out on the field because he was celebrating or he's joking around with the fans and he didn't kneel the ball. And he's supposed to be the captain. He's not even out on the field to win the game for him. And then now he wins the game against or he plays real well against Seattle or whatever ended up happening, whoever he played. And he goes to the strip club after. I don't care if it was your sister's birthday or whatever. You can't do these things. It's like strike one, strike two, strike three. Like he's on his third strike. It's kind of like that's what happened here. You go back to three things, and this guy gets cut. Yeah, he deserves a second chance if he can change his attitude. But man, this guy, as of right now, has an attitude for no reason, and he's done really nothing in the NFL. He's been benched multiple times. He has the look of a great NFL quarterback. When he throws the ball, he has the running ability. He looks like an NFL quarterback. But his mannerisms and his attitude suck. And it's why a guy like Josh Rosen doesn't succeed. And it's why Baker Mayfield's had struggles. If you are going to be that guy that has the quote-unquote attitude issues or the concerns when they come out of college, you got to be perfect. You can't be going to strip clubs. You can't be not kneeling the ball and messing with fans. And you can't do plenty of other things. You can't be showing up late, all that stuff. So the guy does deserve a second chance, but he's made a lot of mistakes. He deserved to get released today.
Well, I wouldn't say he has to be perfect. I would say he would have to be a better player on the field. Like I said in the beginning of my statement, my argument, if he was playing better on the field, like if he was the starting quarterback all year long, Dwayne Haskins would still be on this team. Like, yes, he's gone because of the off-field issues, but he's also gone because he's just sucked this year.
Well, no, yeah, but Jared, I'm saying this too. Like, if you're the captain, you can't do the stuff I'm explaining. Like, you can't show up late. Right. You can't leave the officer. You can't. So not only is he, I get it. Like, I get if you're a player and you're not the captain, like Odell Beckham Jr. or someone like that. Like, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to get away with things. People don't expect you to be like that leader. But if you're the quarterback, you're supposed to be the future quarterback of this franchise, and you're screwing around and you're not taking it seriously, there is a problem with that when you're named the captain. I think that's what I'm trying to say. I get that his play on the field hasn't been – you're going to be great. I mean, obviously, like, there's plenty of quarterbacks that aren't great in their second year, but still, as a captain, you have to be better. And he has not acted like a captain at all. So he deserved to get released. And he'll get a second chance. He's got some good money in his pocket from here on out. It's not like he's going to go broke tomorrow, but he needs to get back in the gym. He needs to get ready for this 2021 season. If someone gives him a chance, he needs to take advantage of that and change his attitude. That's all I'm going to say.
I mean, let's also remember too, coming out of Ohio State, like you mentioned, he only played 1 year as a starter.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of times when college quarterbacks go into the NFL with only having like 1 year or less of starting experience, it doesn't typically go well, at least in the very beginning. Right. And let's talk about Mitchell Trubisky. Same type of thing. Now, Mitch doesn't obviously have the off-field issues that Dwayne Haskins has had so far. But Mitchell Trubisky, coming out of North Carolina, had only started 1 year as well. Right. And obviously the Bears, it's well known, well documented, passed up on Patrick Mahomes, passed up on Deshaun Watson, and ended up getting Mitchell Trubisky. But it was the same thing. He was a 1 year starter. Dwayne Haskins, only a 1 year starter, albeit at Ohio State, obviously a major football program, and they're in the college football playoff, and we'll get to that later. But just because, you're at Ohio State, 1 year is 1 year, man. And then you're expected to jump into the NFL and take the reins over of an NFL franchise. It's like, that's a lot. And so I think there was so much pressure put on this kid who was still a kid, like you said, barely even able to buy himself a beer. I think it was a lot. And I think he just cracked under the pressure. So he needs to go back, regroup, take a deep breath, and try to get himself right. He needs to get himself right off the field first before he can get himself right on the field.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and like you're mentioning, if a guy can play his ass off, and if a guy can be like Drew Brees or Tom Brady, you can do certain things, and you can kind of do whatever you want.
Get more leeway.
We talked about the Clippers earlier. There's not a lot of people complaining about Kawhi Leonard being late to practice or Kawhi Leonard flying his helicopter up and being late to flights because he scores 40 points and he wins you games. So it's different. You know who they dog on is guys like Paul George who don't perform up to their ability. So it's the same thing here with Dwayne Haskins. So
I love when you dog your own team. That's great, man.
Oh, Jared, I have to. I mean, it's you're going to see me dog the Cardinals in a second too. Like it's not good right now. So why don't we get to the NFL? We'll get to the NFC in a second. You mentioned Trubisky. I mentioned the Cardinals. We'll get to that conference in a second. But your Cowboys are in the mix as well for a good old playoff spot against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So it's we're going to start with the AFC here. There is just craziness in the playoff picture here. We're going to go all through it with you guys. At the top, obviously, we have the Kansas City Chiefs, 14-1. They have clinched the number one seed, so I'm sure we won't even see Patrick Mahomes. Or if we do, we'll see him in a quarter or two. Probably won't see Tyreek Hill. Probably won't see Le'Veon Bell either.
No rest. Sweats. Yeah. Lock their shoulder pads and their helmet in there, somewhere. Don't let them get to it. There's no way they're shooting up for this.
And the other thing is too, the Chiefs are also playing the Chargers, who have nothing to play for. So it's not like the Chiefs even have to feel bad about not maybe allowing a playoff team in. They got a game off. So nobody watched that game. I'm sure CBS, of course, Jared, here in LA will force us to watch that game, which sucks. So if you don't have Sunday ticket, you might be screwed there here in LA. But nonetheless, we'll get to real stuff. So then you have the Steelers and Bills at 12-3 and 11-3. Now, we are recording this before Monday Night Football like we usually do. So we assume the Bills will beat the Patriots. Obviously, we assume Pittsburgh would beat Cincinnati last week, Jared. But nonetheless, I think the Bills are, they're one of the best teams in the NFL. I think they'll get it done against the Patriots. Nonetheless, though, no matter what happens in the Monday Night Football game tonight, the Bills and Steelers both have to try in their games because the Bills have the tiebreaker over the Steelers for the number 2 seed. And there's no chance that either of those teams drop to the 4th seed. So just between those two teams, either the Bills or the Steelers would be the number 2 seed. Now, moving on to the rest of this playoff picture. So 4 seed, obviously it needs to be a division winner. We know in the NFC East, this is a problem. It's not necessarily a problem in the AFC. You have Tennessee and the Colts fighting for this number 4 spot. Now, the interesting thing is the Titans right now have the tiebreaker at 10-5 over the Colts. The Colts are actually, in fact, not in the playoffs right now. As crazy as that sounds, they went from up on the Steelers by 3 touchdowns to not being in the playoffs in a matter of like an hour and a half. So it's why you got to love the NFL. But, pretty much we got win and you're in scenario for Tennessee. The Colts need a lot of help. We'll get to that in a second. And then, of course, you have Miami, you have Cleveland, and you have Baltimore, and then Cleveland. That's the order.
Right, and let's assume that the Titans do. I think they had a letdown when they were playing Green Bay last night on Sunday Night Football. Now, listen, Green Bay is one of the best teams in the league, and they are fighting for that number 1 overall seed in the NFC. So it's not like, we can't sit here and say, man, Titans, like, what were you guys doing? They ran into a really good team. It's just that I think we expected the Titans to kind of play a little bit harder and play a little better. Like, it was a snow game in Green Bay. Right? Like, that is Derrick Henry's, like, all-time game. Like, Derrick Henry should have ran for 200 yards and, like, 5 touchdowns, right? I mean, I believe it was earlier in the season, Dalvin Cook ran for 4 touchdowns against Green Bay. Like, Green Bay, literally, their run defense is Swiss cheese. Like, we know that in Green Bay, Wisconsin, they are known for their cheese, and that is what their defense is. It is Swiss cheese. It is so soft. Cheese heads, right? So the fact that Tennessee did not run the ball more effectively and did not make that game more competitive kind of, gives me some hesitations as to wanting to just put them in as that AFC South champion.
Yeah.
But then when I look at their schedule and see that they're playing the Texans, it's like, okay, you should beat the Texans. I will say, though, did you see J.J. Watt of the Texans? Did you see his post-game press conference?
I did not. No, what he said.
Okay. You need to go look at it afterwards, and I'm not going to quote it verbatim or anything, but he was pissed off, basically saying, and I think he was putting some of his own teammates on notice, saying, if the fact that we suck, our record is like 4-11, 4-12, whatever it is, but if you don't want to, show up, work out, work hard, and no matter what the record is, basically show up and play for your teammates, then you shouldn't be here. So J.J. Watt's fired up. So I can guarantee you that in a Week 17 meaningless game for the Texans, J.J. Watt is going to show up. And I guarantee you Deshaun Watson and some of those other guys are too. So this isn't necessarily a cakewalk for Tennessee, even though on paper, Tennessee is clearly the better team. So, let's say that Tennessee does get in. And then number 5, we got Miami, right? I mean, how crazy of a game did Miami have with the Raiders? I mean, if you're the Raiders, like, we've been calling the Raiders, or at least I've been calling the Raiders frauds for the last couple of weeks, but it can't be, more true than it is right now. Miami got such a gift. Like, the best, Santa was on Miami's side. Like, Santa gave Miami the best gift they could ever give them, which was an opportunity to basically win their Week 17 game, and they're in. And they're playing the Bills, who are obviously, one of the better teams in the AFC. So it'll be tough. But guess what? Even if Miami doesn't win, all they have to do is hope for a loss. I believe it is either Baltimore or Cleveland, right? And Miami is in.
Miami has to get a loss.
Cleveland loses.
If they get a loss from Baltimore, Cleveland, or Colts.
Or the Colts, and Miami's in. So, Miami has multiple scenarios. They're obviously, things are looking good for them. They have an 84% chance to make the playoffs. Obviously, we've seen with this season, anything can happen. We've seen the Jets, the worst team in probably not just franchise history, but probably NFL history, win 2 straight games. Obviously, we saw the Bengals beat the Steelers last week, so anything can happen. But more than likely, the Dolphins will get in. Probably the team that I'm most confident in is the Baltimore Ravens. Won 4 in a row. They're 10-5 right now, but because the Steelers started 11-0, there's no way that Baltimore can win the division. And I believe it's the first time in 4 years that Baltimore has not won the division. But Lamar Jackson's rolling right now. That defense seems to be balling. So they've got a 91.6% chance to make the playoffs. Another situation where it's win and in, or if the Browns or Colts lose. And also, Baltimore gets Cincinnati in Week 17. So I'm almost certain that we can check Baltimore into the playoff there. Yeah. Pretty much, I think we're both on the same page there.
100%.
And now we get to the Cleveland Browns, who I just mentioned, lost to the now 2-win Jets, who, because the Jets won, they actually lost. and they gave the Jacksonville Jaguars the number 1 overall pick. So Trevor Lawrence, you just went from looking at houses in New York to now looking at houses in Florida. Congratulations. But in all seriousness, if you're Cleveland, they were dealing with some COVID issues. They were depleted at their wide receiver core. I believe their top 4 wide receivers were out, including Jarvis Landry. So Baker Mayfield was literally throwing the ball to practice squad wide receivers. Now, in the post-game press conference, Baker Mayfield, he said something along the lines of like, shame on you if you want to like put blame on us for losing without our wide receivers. And it's like, no, dude, like, yeah, Baker Mayfield, you didn't play well, but those receivers that suited up on Sunday, like, if I'm not mistaken, they're still professionals. They may not be Pro Bowlers or, all-world guys making all the money in the world. They're not Odell Beckham Jr. They're not, Devontae Adams or anything like that. But they're still professional athletes. And, like, isn't the old saying, like, stay ready so you don't have to get ready? So, yeah. And the fact that you're playing the Jets, like, you get beat the Jets. Listen, like, we've talked about how Cleveland's been good, and for the last couple of weeks, Baker Mayfield has been just like, everyone loves Baker Mayfield, saying, oh, he's finally turned the corner, all this stuff. Well, listen, Baker Mayfield, if you really turned the corner, then you would have beat the Jets regardless of it. Nick, you and I could have ran routes for the Browns on Sunday. And Baker Mayfield should have been able to beat the Jets with you and I at wide receiver. Like, I'm sorry, but
we're good receivers, Jared. We're good.
You want to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league? Listen, this was the Browns being the Browns at the end of the day. So to me, even if the Browns do make the playoffs, they have a 53% chance. I simply do not trust them. I don't. And after the performance that we saw against the Jets, regardless of who was on the field, I can't sit here and say that I trust them. And they get the Steelers in their last game of the season. It's like, that's not going to be an easy game, right? The Steelers are still there. They got something to prove. Steelers have been a little turbulent lately, so they're not just gonna forfeit this game and lose. They're gonna come out and try to win. So the Browns.
I'll say this too: Steelers do not want to be 3rd seed. That means you play the Ravens.
Nope.
So potentially, I mean, seeding could change a little bit, but very interesting stuff here. Again, you look at Miami and their playoff chances. They're at the Bills. The Bills will be trying. They will be trying next week. And the way, what I love, Jared, I don't know if you know this or if our audience knows this, the way the NFL stacked up the games this week, nobody's going to know who's won in these playoff races. So
That's smart.
They're all doing it at the same time. So the Dolphins won't know if the Ravens are winning or the Ravens won't know, so they're just going to, obviously there's scoreboards and they can look up at the score. And if someone's up by 30 or down by 30, you probably know you're going to win. But nonetheless, the Bills will be trying this weekend. And so Miami is a tough job. Again, we're talking about the Ravens. They're playing Cincinnati. You're not going to get that Ravens loss. The Colts, they're playing the Jags. You're not going to get that Colts loss. So you look at the Browns. I think when we're looking at this AFC playoff race here and the non-division winners, the Browns is the one where you look and you're like, okay, that's the team we're all rooting to lose. Like right there, that let's go Steelers, right? And the Steelers are going to have to try to, like I was mentioning, they don't want that 3rd seed. They don't want to have to play, they don't want to have to play the Colts again. They don't want to have to play the Ravens. So it's interesting stuff going on here. And so the AFC is nuts. Once again, let me just go. I'm going to go through real quickly who all these teams are playing. Kansas City, obviously, with essentially the bye this week, they've already clinched number 1 seed. The Steelers, they are at the Browns. Don't know if that means much. Browns do have fans, so maybe it means something. But nonetheless, Steelers have kind of owned the Browns over the last 20 years, Jared. So I'm pretty sure they won't have a problem. And they beat them by 30 the first time they played them too. Bills, they are versus Miami. After New England, of course. That is a home game for them. The Titans are at the Texans. Dolphins at Bills, like I just mentioned. Ravens at the Bengals. Cleveland versus Pittsburgh, and Indianapolis versus the Jags. So there you go. That's the AFC for you. And we'll be talking about who made the playoffs, and we'll be predicting the playoffs for the AFC next week. Let's move on to the NFC. Now, a little less at play here for the major players here. We do have the number 1 seed still up for grabs. You have Green Bay with only a one. They only have a 1-game lead on the Saints and Seahawks.
Right.
The Saints number 2 seed, Seahawks number 3 seed. Now, the thing about these teams is the Packers play the Bears at Chicago. Chicago, one of the hottest teams in football right now, so tough matchup. You'd still expect them to win with how the Packers have played, but tough matchup. And the Saints they're at Carolina, did win. And then Seattle at 49ers. 49ers did beat my Cardinals. They seem to be trying to end this year, so you never know, and Seattle's defense isn't that good. But some fairly, not easy matchups, but not the worst matchups in the world for these 3 top teams. And then you, of course, have Washington. They are at the Eagles. Now, Jared, we're gonna get to Washington in a second, but out of these top 3 teams, do you see any of the top 3 teams losing this weekend?
I would say because the Bears are playing so well that, like, I guess the Packers, but then it's like the Packers, Aaron Rodgers is having an MVP season and arguably one of the best seasons of his entire career, right?
Yeah.
I heard a stat on Get Up on ESPN this morning, and I believe it was by Dan Orlovsky, and he said that in the last 5 games, Aaron Rodgers has thrown 15 touchdowns and only 11 incompletions. Like, just like think about that for a minute. 15 touchdowns in the last 5 games, touchdowns, completed passes, and only 11 incompletions. Like, Aaron Rodgers is on fire right now. Like, he seems so comfortable in this offense, completely running the offense. Like, he doesn't even need the offensive coordinator or the play caller, Matt LaFleur, from the sideline. Like, Aaron Rodgers is literally in a zone doing what he wants. So I'm torn because the Bears are probably the Bears and Packers is probably the best matchup going into Week 17. Yeah. But I just don't know how you go against the Packers. The Saints playing the Panthers. Yeah, the Panthers beat the Redskins last week, but that was beat the Washington football team last week. That was with Dwayne Haskins. I don't see the Panthers realistically beating the Saints in Week 17. The Seahawks get the 49ers. 49ers just beat your Cardinals, right? The 49ers are a tough team as well. They can run the ball very well, but I don't believe they're going to have Raheem Mostert. And the Seahawks, if we think they are, the team, if we think that the Seahawks are the team we think they are, then in all reality, Seattle should be able to go into, I was about to say go into San Francisco, but San Francisco is actually playing in Arizona. So they should be able to go into Arizona and beat the 49ers. So I guess I will say the Bears over the Packers, but not confident in that. Just answering the question.
Yeah, and so just to give you guys a heads up, this is what has to happen for the number 1 seed to be clinched by these other teams besides Green Bay. Again, if Green Bay just beat Chicago, the number 1 seed, they get a bye. If they lose to Chicago and the Saints win, the Saints also have to get a loss from Seattle in order to get the number 1 seed. Seattle, I believe, what is it? They would need to beat the 49ers and also have the Packers and Saints lose. So
right.
There's a chance. So that's, again, all these top seeds are going to be playing tough this weekend. They're going to be playing hard. So we'll see all those teams, fighting for those spots. And again, one of the craziest Week 17 weekends where there's a lot of teams playing tough. And so the top seed still up for grabs, and tough game for for the Packers playing Chicago, a hot Chicago team. So now we have the NFC East. Jared, our favorite division on this show. Somehow Washington didn't clinch last week against Carolina, and they created this mess. There is one team that has been eliminated, and it's the Philadelphia Eagles, who may actually have the most talented quarterback, or probably realistically have the most talented quarterback currently right now in this division. They are eliminated. They can't win. And they play Washington. So Washington at least has that. Maybe a team demoralized that they're not going to make the playoffs. But then again, I believe Philadelphia has like the number 4 pick in the draft right now. So maybe they want to lose because other teams, well, you know what I'm saying? So like, when you look at the Ravens playing Cincinnati and the other teams playing, like they might need to lose. But nonetheless, there's one team that's eliminated in the Eagles. All Washington has to do is win this game against the Eagles. The question is, who the hell is going to be the quarterback? Because you don't have Dwayne Haskins on your roster anymore. You might not have Alex Smith, so you might have to turn to former XFL quarterback Taylor Heineke. He came in late in the game. So if anybody saw, he threw a couple good passes, had a couple drops from the sorry Washington wide receivers on that team. No Terry McLaurin yesterday, so hopefully they have him back. But Washington, if they just win, they're in. Again, they're playing the Eagles. And then you have the Giants and Cowboys playing each other in a big boy matchup. Dallas continues to irritate my co-host Jared Smith every single week by continuing to win, continuing to drop in the standings. But then again, they can make the playoffs. So again, here's the thing. Here's the scenario for this. If Washington wins, they're in. If Washington loses, the winner of the Giants-Cowboys game is the NFC East champion. You know what the NFL did for us, Jared? They put Cowboys and Giants early on in the day, and they put Washington in Sunday Night Football. So we will not know the NFC East champion until about 9 o'clock Pacific time, which is just how it should be, right? What are your thoughts on the NFC East, Jared? Like, what you got? What the hell's going to – and what's going to happen? Who do you think ends up actually winning the division?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind is the fact that regardless of who wins, whether it's the football team, whether it's Cowboys, whether it's the Giants, the winner of the NFC Least will have a sub 500 team, right? The winner will have a 7-9 record. And that is just unheard of. I believe the last team to get into the playoffs with a sub 500 record to end a year was the Carolina Panthers. And I forget what year it was, but if I'm not mistaken, I think they might have even played your Arizona Cardinals in the playoffs. So
they did. Yeah, we were on our fourth string quarterback off the street in that game. So we actually lost.
Yeah.
Ryan Lindley.
So never say never. It's just you just don't see a team with a sub 500 record get into the playoffs, right? You see it every once in a while in the NBA and potentially baseball, who knows? But in the NFL, it just doesn't happen. Like in the NFL, you've got to get to 10 wins and potentially maybe 9, but 10 wins is more or less safe to get you in, right? I mean, think about it. Like there's so many teams that are in other divisions that if they were just in the NFC East, like would have wrapped up this division like 5 weeks ago. Yeah, it's crazy to think about. But no, in all seriousness, the football team should win this division. Obviously, they did not do what they had to do yesterday and not taking care of business and beating the Carolina Panthers. I do believe that Alex Smith will play in this game. I heard a report this morning on Monday morning that Alex Smith is probable to play. I think they purposely held him out yesterday just as more precaution since the injury is to the leg that he had those multiple surgeries on. And so I think they just wanted to be extra cautious. But more than likely, Alex Smith should be good to go. And the football team is the better team over the Philadelphia Eagles. Like you mentioned, Philadelphia, nothing to play for, demoralized because they are now out of the playoffs. Jalen Hurts is playing well, and obviously Philadelphia wants to see another game out of him to see if he is the future franchise quarterback and if they can eventually let go of Carson Wentz. So Philadelphia, while they're eliminated, I think they're still going to play hard. And also when you're playing a division rival and you have an opportunity to spoil that rival's chances of getting in the playoffs, like you're going to play hard, right? So this game, I don't see this game being a blowout. I see it being a close back and forth matchup. But with Alex Smith at the helm, I think the football team does get it done. Now, we've obviously seen crazier things happen. So, if it doesn't, then it comes down to my Cowboys going to New York to play the New York Giants. And to be honest, I can't say that I have, a whole lot of faith. Cowboys won 3 in a row, surprisingly playing a lot better. And here's the thing, right? It's not that they're playing great because they're not by any stretch of the imagination. You know what they're doing, Nick? They're playing with passion and they're hustling. You know what it is? It's like literally, and you can, attribute it to Dak Prescott's gruesome injury earlier in the year. And I think there's a lot of players in the Cowboys locker room that were demoralized by that. And that probably dampened, their feelings and their thoughts. And that's maybe why. But It's like it just seems like these last couple weeks, Dallas has just played with more energy and more fire, more passion, like they actually want to be on the field, right? And so once again, imagine if Dallas was playing with this type of intensity in week 6, week 7, week 8. They might already have this division wrapped up. So, the Giants, they get Daniel Jones back, but Daniel Jones, to me, he's got an ankle injury. He's also got a knee injury. He did not look good yesterday going up against the Ravens. The Ravens do have a good defense, but just saying, I don't think Daniel Jones is 100%. Obviously, they don't have Saquon Barkley. They don't have that many weapons on the offensive side of the ball. Not even a homer pick and especially the way Dallas looked last week offensively. They played very well. Their receivers finally showed up with the trio of Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and rookie CeeDee Lamb. So if the Washington football team does not win and take care of business on Sunday night against Philadelphia, I am reluctantly going to have to go with my Dallas Cowboys, who
That's crazy.
Seem like the better team over the Giants.
Crazy.
It's
insane, right?
It's unreal.
It's insane. But Jared, I'm predicting them to win. I'm predicting them to win the NFC East because I don't trust Washington. I don't trust them. I know Alex Smith is there, but if Alex Smith isn't healthy, man, that does not give me confidence. The Eagles still have, like I said, I think the Eagles right now have the best quarterback playing. Obviously, I think the Dallas Cowboys have the best quarterback in the division. He's obviously not playing. But, Jalen Hurts, he's just a rookie. He doesn't care about draft picks, right? Like, he wants to win these games. So I'm going to go with Dallas to win this division. The Giants have looked terrible the last few games. They have no chance, I think, to beat Dallas. Well, I shouldn't say no chance. I should not say that when I'm talking about the NFC East, so I apologize. But, yeah, I think Dallas wins. I think if Washington doesn't have Alex Smith, they're not winning that game at all against Philadelphia. And I think Dallas somehow gets in. But there, I did want to correct you on one thing. You were incorrect. If the Giants make it in the playoffs, they're 6-10, not 7-9. So you'd have a 6-10.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I just wanted to correct you there.
It's still a sub 500 record. Okay,
of course, you were right.
It's
you were
bad
happy.
all the way you look at it. Actually, the Football Power Index on ESPN, the Giants have a 24% chance to make the playoffs. The Cowboys have the lowest percentage at 16.9, and the Washington football team, as far as the NFC East goes, has a 58.7% chance. So, clearly they are thinking that Washington will handle their business and get it done, and they give the Cowboys the least chance to get in.
That I think that's based off the fact the Giants have the what you call it
home field.
They beat Washington twice, so that's why I think Dallas can't tie Washington's record. So New York technically could tie their record. That's impossible now, but New York, if they would have won last week, could have technically all they would have to do is win and Washington lose, and then they're in. So it's one of those things. I guess that still technically will happen, but that still will happen if they're in. It would have been a lot easier. All right, yeah, and then so for the rest of the NFC playoffs, it's very interesting here. Number 5 seed is Tampa. Tampa's going to be the number 5 seed. They can't go lower. They can't go higher. So maybe you see Tampa not play their guys. It'll just be interesting to see who. They don't know who they're going to play in the playoffs yet, and that is because obviously the 1 through 3 seed is not decided yet. And the 4 seed, the 4 seed. So Tampa's waiting to see who they play in the NFC East for the playoffs. So of course, Jared, somehow Tom Brady got the first week of the playoffs off. It's just not fair. There's just some guys that just get every advantage in life, and it's Tom Brady. Tom Brady's one of them. Somehow he's going to get the NFC East in that first round. Man, did they kill Detroit on Saturday too? They showed they're ready for the playoffs. But getting to the 5 through the 6 to 7 seed, bunch of scenarios that could happen. Right now, you have the Los Angeles Rams and the Chicago Bears in the playoff spots right now. Los Angeles Rams at 9-6, Chicago at 8-7, and you have my Cardinals on the outside looking in at 8-7, same record as Chicago. No matter what, Chicago has the tiebreaker over the Cardinals. So if they end up with the same record, the Cardinals will not make the playoffs. That is, unless the Cardinals can beat the Rams, and then the Rams aren't in the playoffs. So a lot of people didn't know that going into this week, that the Rams actually aren't in the playoffs yet. I think a lot of people assumed that when the Cardinals lost on Saturday, the Rams were going to be in the playoffs. That's not true. The Cardinals would actually technically have a better divisional record in the NFC West than the Rams. And how crazy is that? Because the Cardinals have been kind of, one of those teams a lot of people thought would have the worst record in the NFC West, just playing each other. The Cardinals, if they beat the Rams, would have the better NFC West record. That would be how the tiebreaker works with them. They would also both be 9-7. Now, the Rams can still make the playoffs if Chicago loses or if they just beat the Cardinals. So I don't know if that's confusing or not. Chicago, though, is in with a win. Chicago is in with a win. So all Chicago has to do is beat the number one seed Packers. not easy. As a Cardinals fan, I'm excited about that. Nonetheless, though, we still have to win. So the Cardinals, all they have to do is win as well. The Rams actually need help if they don't win. So the Cardinals, if they don't win, they're out of the playoffs. They do not make it, and we will be sitting there waiting for 14th draft pick or something like that. And if the Rams lose, they're waiting to see what ends up in that Chicago game. And if Chicago loses, they're hoping the Cardinals lose as well. So interesting stuff there. Jared, now here's the interesting thing. Obviously, we have Mitch Trubisky versus the Green Bay Packers. Mitch Trubisky's been arguably one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL over the last 3 weeks to a month. Besides, when they played the Packers the last time, right? They got killed. It wasn't even close. So you have that there. And then for the Rams and Cardinals, you're thinking, okay, this is going to be, this is Jared Goff and this offense versus Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins. No, guys. Right as of right now, both quarterbacks are questionable. Jared Goff has a broken thumb, and Kyler has a lower leg injury that Cliff Kingsbury is not telling anybody about. We might see, for a playoff spot, John Wolford versus Chris Streeter. You know what that would mean, Jared? That would mean that you would have a potentially, if Alex Smith doesn't play, Jared Goff doesn't play, and Kyler Murray doesn't play, you would have an AAF, an XFL, and a CFL quarterback fighting for playoff spots.
I mean, that's what we're looking for in Week 17, right? Represent, man. I mean,
it's craziness. It's just crazy. Yeah. Jared, what are your thoughts on the bottom of the NFC? I mean, a lot of it determines on who's playing quarterbacks for these teams, right? But
no doubt, yeah. No, the Bears clearly are the hottest team going into Week 17 as far as these teams that are fighting for a wild card spot right now. But they have to go up against the gauntlet and the Green Bay Packers. And so with Mitch Trubisky, his record against Green Bay is awful. I believe in his career he might have 1 or 2 wins, but I mean it's Green Bay typically owns Mitchell Trubisky. So for as well as the Bears are playing offensively, running the ball more effectively, and defensively having one of the best defensive units in all of football, I think they do need to protect Mitch and continue to run the ball with David Montgomery. And then on defense, just try to contain Aaron Rodgers, because you're not going to stop the guy, right? But you just hope that he doesn't go off for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. If he throws for 250 and 2 touchdowns, that's got to be considered a win if you're the Bears defense. Yeah. So I think, for the Bears offense, they're going to have to continue to score and score and score, because Aaron Rodgers and the Packers can score whenever they want. So we will really see what the Bears are made of, right? Are the Bears really hot, and are they a potential for real team? Or was this just a fluke and they look good against some mediocre to, average at best teams? We will see. As far as the Rams and the Cardinals go, don't trust either of those teams. Don't really care which one of these teams gets in the playoffs, because I don't trust either one of them, right? You mentioned Jared Goff dealing with a broken thumb on his throwing hand. And it's listen, the Rams, they look good most of the year, and then 2 weeks ago, they lose to the Jets, and at the time, the Jets didn't have a win. The Jets were going to have the number 1 pick. They were one of the worst teams in all the NFL, and at home. I don't care, fans, no fans, there were no fans, but the Rams lose to the Jets at home, right? And that starts a little bit of their downward spiral, and then they obviously lose yesterday to the Seahawks, and the Seahawks end up wrapping up the NFC West. So the Rams right now, have lost 2 games in a row. Your starting quarterback potentially out for a pivotal matchup in Week 17 against a division rival. And the only two good things I can say about the Rams are that they still have Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey. Other than that, not too much to get excited about if you are a Rams fan. As far as the Cardinals go, it's just like a roller coaster of a season for them as well. Kyler Murray, the first half of the season, like he was kind of in the MVP talk. Like, I mean, the guy is such a dual threat, and he was playing so well, and then some of the injuries started to creep up on him, and I just don't feel like he's had enough time to really recover. It's been more of just like, hey, we need you out there. So he's kind of just going through it and dealing with the pain. But we've obviously seen in these last 3 or 4 weeks that his level of play has dipped. And I think it is mainly because of these injuries that he is more or less nursing and not able to actually get healed. So without Kyler Murray, I'm sorry, this Cardinals team goes absolutely nowhere. So you better hope and pray to whoever you pray to that Kyler Murray plays. Because if he does not, I don't care who the Rams put out there. I don't see the Cardinals beating the Rams without Kyler Murray.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting. It's hard to predict this Rams-Cardinals game just because if one team has a quarterback, you'd probably expect that team to win. If both have a quarterback, I think a lot of people pick the Rams. And then if both don't have a quarterback, you have no idea what's going to happen because both Streebler and Wolford have never started NFL games and have only played a handful of snaps, period. So it's very interesting in that, and it's hard to predict. So we'll just see what ends up happening. I'm obviously rooting for my Cardinals to win. I don't care about how we've looked. I don't care about what seed we get, 6, 7 seed. I think it's valuable that a young quarterback like Kyler just has a playoff experience, right? I think that's valuable. So I want my Cardinals to be in the playoffs. And for the Rams, you know, I don't know what to think about the Rams. I thought a few weeks ago they were a Super Bowl contender, and I don't think that anymore. They looked horrible against Seattle. Before Jared Goff hurt his thumb, he was sucking. So it's not like that game was bad because Jared Goff was hurt. But nonetheless, yeah, those are all your scenarios. It's going to be crazy, Jared. We'll be talking about it next week. No doubt predicting the NFL playoffs. We'll be back for sure. Starting the new year. Some new things in the podcast as well. So get excited to that as well. But yeah, all right, Jared, let's get into the college football playoff. We got a whole segment left. Doesn't even matter what time we are in the podcast. We got to talk about these college football playoffs. Notre Dame versus Alabama. Clemson versus Ohio State. Big time matchups. January 1st. Let's start with Notre Dame, Alabama, because this is so far the more lopsided line. Alabama's supposed to win this game by 17 points plus, according to Caesars Entertainment, that sports book. Many people didn't think Notre Dame should even be in the final.
I was one of them.
Absolutely. And a lot of teams thought that Alabama should have been the number 1 seed. So this is, the biggest one of the. That's what I'm saying. A lot of people expected them. Yeah. So this is a big mismatch coming in here. There's some keys to each team. There's obviously more keys for Notre Dame because Alabama can make mistakes and still win this game. But Jared, I'll let you kind of just go over this game first. I have a lot of in-depth analysis of what I think Notre Dame needs to do. So I'll give you the floor first here. Essentially, how does Notre Dame win this game?
Hoping and praying, and that might not even get it done. And that's that. Like, I'm gonna let you get into like the nuts and bolts.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I'm serious. Like, it does not take a genius to see that Notre Dame. Their only loss of the season obviously was to Clemson in their final game, but like they got whooped. Like Clemson with Trevor Lawrence said, all right, like we're back. This is our team at full strength, and they just came out and completely daddied Notre Dame, right? Notre Dame, I'm
daddied.
Sorry.
Wow.
Yeah, they 34-10 in the ACC championship.
I've just never heard you say that on this podcast. What a term.
No, on this podcast, it's I'm not making up new words, but I'm bringing up new words because. Listen, that's Notre Dame was that bad. And we saw Notre Dame lose to Clemson, and now we expect Notre Dame to come out and somehow put up a fight against Alabama. And Alabama is better than Clemson, right? So they may not have the better quarterback. I would say that Trevor Lawrence is the better quarterback. over Mac Jones of Alabama. But in almost every other category, doesn't matter, offense, defense, wide receiver, offensive line, defensive line, doesn't matter. Alabama takes the cake. So for Notre Dame, I mean, this could get ugly very quickly for Notre Dame, in my opinion. I mean, and then also Notre Dame just has not had luck against Alabama. If I'm not mistaken, it was, I would have to go back and look. But the last time that Notre Dame played Alabama in the college football playoff, which was like 4 or 5 years ago, they got whooped again. They got murdered. Right?
Everett Golson was the quarterback.
Right.
Remember that?
A lot of bad taste in Notre Dame fans' mouths right now. And I think that is only going to continue. The way that Alabama has played this year, the one thing I will say, let me just check their schedule very quickly. But Alabama, they blow teams out. Like, they do not have that many close wins or wins that, come down to the final. I would say the game against Florida in the SEC championship, that was close, 52-46. And then earlier in the year, somehow they let Ole Miss score 48 on them. Alabama still won 63-48. But I will say that Alabama's defense has only gotten better. I believe they started the year. They had a lot of freshmen and sophomores on that side of the ball. And with experience and with game experience, they have continued to get better under, obviously, Nick Saban's tutelage. So to me, like, Alabama, they could be like an NFL expansion team. And like, we kind of joke about that. I'm kind of not joking. Like, Alabama is really that good. So I don't see any scenario, none whatsoever. None. I don't care if Mac Jones, I'm not saying I don't want him to, but like, if he were to get injured and the Alabama backup were to come in, the Alabama backup is probably a 5-star. Like, Alabama's backups and third strings and fourth strings are all 5 stars that could start anywhere else. Like, you go to Alabama knowing that you're going to just have to wait your turn. So no scenario where I see Notre Dame upsetting Alabama. Like, Alabama, just plug them in, not even pencil. Pen Alabama in to the actual championship game.
Sharpie him in if you
Sharpie him in.
If you are on Jared Smith's side on this, yes. Sharpie Alabama in. Okay, so I'll say this.
So you're not on my side on this.
No. I just have broken down Notre Dame and tried to find a way.
Stacks.
I'll say this, okay? If Alabama does these things, if they have a balanced offensive attack, they're going to win this game.
Notre Dame?
No. This is Alabama.
Okay.
Balanced attack. Getting the ball to Devontae Smith, giving it to Najee Harris. Balanced. Not catering to one side of the ball. And limiting Notre Dame to field goals, not touchdowns. Simple one. And then big pressure on Ian Book. If all three of those things happen, Notre Dame has zero chance. I agree with you. Because Alabama is just too talented. They spread around.
Notre Dame has zero chance, regardless of any of those things you just said.
His thing. No, I'm just going to say, we just talked about Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys had a less than 1% chance at making the playoffs, and now we just both predicted they would get it. I'm just saying, there's a chance. There's always a chance. Notre Dame, though, here are my keys to the game, and this is going to be legitimate analysis. I'm going to try to turn your mind a little bit to give them a chance. Notre Dame has to play mistake-free football. This is clear. No interceptions, no fumble, no freaking missed field goals like they did against Clemson, right? If you look actually at that game against Clemson, again, the score was 34-10. The biggest mistakes they made, the missed field goal and a failed 4th and 3 play that on back-to-back drives, led to 2 Clemson touchdowns because the momentum swung way in Clemson's favor. Okay, on those two plays. If not for those 2 plays, it's a 20-10 game. There, we're not talking about Notre Dame looking so bad if those 2 mistakes aren't made. So I'm gonna give them a little credit there. If they just don't make those mistakes in that Clemson game, they look a lot better coming in. So they need to play mistake-free football. It's another simple football, something to do if you're playing a tough team. Limiting 3rd and long scenarios. Try to get none of them. 3rd and 5s, 3rd and 6s, 3rd and 3s. You don't want to be throwing obvious pass. You don't want to have obvious pass downs against a team like Alabama. And on drives, touchdowns and not field goals. You can't be kicking field goals. I look to the Notre Dame Clemson game the first time around with the St. John Bosco backup quarterback in DJ Ualungale. That's how you pronounce. That's how you pronounce his name.
I was waiting to screw that up.
In this game, Notre Dame scored a touchdown on their first play of the game. I think it was like a 65-yard run. They did not score another offensive touchdown in that game until the last play of regulation. So they scored an offensive touchdown on the first play of the game and on the last play of regulation. They went into overtime and they scored 2 touchdowns, but they start on the 25. So essentially, Notre Dame was not able to get in the end zone. The only other touchdown they had in that game was a fumble recovery touchdown. So from their defense, they kicked like 6 field goals in that game. They're lucky they even beat Clemson that game. And it's another reason why Notre Dame shouldn't have been the number 4 seed, because even when you look at that game, they scored 2 touchdowns offensively against that Clemson team. Not good enough. So they need to score touchdowns and not field goals. Creative play calling. I don't want to see super vanilla offensive play calls or vanilla defensive play calls. I want to see you put pressure on Mac Jones on defense. I want to see a trick play here and there, right, from Notre Dame. You have to pull out all the stops to beat an Alabama team. It's okay for Alabama to get first downs. This is college football. They have the 3 Heisman candidates on this team. It's okay to give Alabama some first downs, but not chunk plays, not plays over 15, 20 yards. You can't allow those plays. Play some zone defense. It's just try to hold Alabama to field goals the best you possibly can. It's okay to give up first downs. Just hold the chunk plays. And then commit to stopping either the pass or the run, because you can't stop both. You have to put a game plan in place. Hey, we're going to stop Mac Jones. We're going to make Najee Harris beat us. Or we're going to make Devontae Smith beat us, and we're going to stop Najee Harris. That's the only way Notre Dame can win this game. Mistake-free football, creative play calling, touchdowns, not field goals, and focusing defensively on one thing instead of letting Alabama have that balanced offensive attack. So both the keys kind of balance each other out. That's my ways of having Notre Dame win this game. But, Jared, I'm going to tell you this. I bet Alabama to beat that 17.5 line. I don't think this is going to be very good. I don't see Notre Dame having much chance in this game because they just can't score touchdowns. They can't score touchdowns. Against Clemson, they've scored 3 offensive touchdowns in regulation, because I don't count overtime. You start on the 20 or whatever. But in regulation, they've scored 3 offensive touchdowns against Clemson. So that's how you look at it. I'm not going to compare them against Miami and North Carolina. I don't care about those teams. I'm going to look at Clemson, and what they did against Clemson was they couldn't score, and Alabama's defense is better than Clemson's. So it's going to be a bloodbath. But hopefully it's not, because for our sake, I hope it's a close game. Has that changed your mind at all? Jared, has that changed your mind at all, or should we just go to Clemson, Ohio State?
We need to move on, because if anything, you've only like made me my argument stronger for Alabama. Yeah.
Okay. All right, fair. We need to move on. Jared, I'll say this, though. This is the exact opposite of that first game. So excited for this one. Ohio State, Clemson, Justin Fields versus Trevor Lawrence, number 1 pick versus number 2 pick. No matter which way you see it. Maybe this game determines who the number 1 pick is. I don't know, right? But so I'll start off this one with my keys for both these teams. For Clemson, I think they need to get ETN going. There's been a couple of these big games for Clemson. ETN is not rushed for that many yards. Both games against Notre Dame, he struggled. With the first game, he only rushed for 28 yards in that first Notre Dame game. Very good Notre Dame strategy. So I'm sure Ohio State will key on that. And he had less than 100 yards besides a big touchdown run at the end of the half. So Notre Dame almost pretty much held ETN to under 150 yards in the 2 games. So if Ohio State can do that, they have a chance. Clemson, they need to use Lawrence's legs as well. Hey, you're fighting for a championship. If Lawrence doesn't want to take hits, he doesn't want to run, that's a problem. This is championship football. Lawrence is going to have to go out there, and he's going to have to use his legs, take some hits. But you have to use that advantage you have as well. Force Fields to stay in the pocket for Ohio State. Fields takes a long time to throw the ball. It's similar, not as bad as Baker Mayfield, but Justin Fields takes a little bit too long to throw the ball. So if you can keep him in the pocket and force him to throw the ball, pressure him, he can't use his legs. So both, when he's running and when he's passing, keep him in the pocket. And then a stat here, Clemson hasn't allowed over 23 points in a game with Lawrence as their quarterback. So I said this: if Clemson can keep Ohio State to 4 scores or less, I think they win this football game. I'll guarantee it right there. If they allow Ohio State to score 28 points or less, they're going to win this game. Both teams, college football is a little more high scoring, so you might think of that as like 28 points. But they haven't allowed over 23 points in a game. So I expected their defense as well they'll win the game. Ohio State, they can't let the foot off the gas if they have a significant lead. Their one big game this season against Indiana, they were up 35-7 at the beginning of the third quarter. They only won that game 42-35. So they cannot, if they get a lead here on Clemson by 10 or 14, they cannot let their foot off the gas. They need to still continue that balanced attack of Justin Fields and Trey Sermon and Master Teague and Olive and the other receiver for them is the top one. I forget his name.
Olave.
No. Olave is the one. Is it Miller? Is that his name?
They've got George Wilson. He actually leads
George Wilson
in yards and touchdowns.
Yeah. So if they have that balanced attack, that going throughout the game, that helps them. I similar to Clemson, use Fields' legs to your advantage. He's a big guy. Reminds me of Cardell Jones. Right, I remember Cardell Jones using his legs and body in that national championship run, and especially against Oregon in that final game, man. So I would love to see if Ohio State could do that again. Keep Lawrence off the field. You need quick touchdowns or you need long drives. Do not if you can limit the amount of time Trevor Lawrence is on the field, that's an advantage in itself. That's a win in itself. That's kind of playing defense while also playing offense. And like I mentioned earlier, balanced attack. So those are my two keys for both these teams, or my keys for both these teams. Hard game to pick, but I will do my prediction after you give your analysis as well.
Yeah, so this game, and you're completely right. This is a 180 from the Alabama and Notre Dame game to where, listen, I think right off the bat, this game is going to get chippy. And I say that because Dabo Swinney, head coach at Clemson, came out, and I believe it was last week, and he ranked in the coaches poll, he ranked Ohio State as number 11 in the country. Like Ohio State is number 3.
Disrespect.
Like, you talk about disrespect. So if you're Ohio State, if you're head coach Ryan Day, if you're Justin Fields, if you're the rest of these players in this coaching staff, I mean, that's all the motivation that you need right there to say, okay, obviously that coach on the other sideline and that team doesn't respect us. Now, also, to what Ohio State can look to is just last year in the College Football Playoff, where these two same teams played. It was just their rankings were flipped. Clemson was number 3 and Ohio State was number 2. Clemson still ended up winning and made it to the national championship. So if you're Ohio State, I think you've got a lot to sit here and digest, right, and use as motivation. Also, if you're Justin Fields, you're looking at Trevor Lawrence, who is no doubt going to be the number 1 overall pick. But I think Justin Fields wants to come out and prove that he is no doubt the number 2 best quarterback. And in his mind, he probably thinks he's the best. Like, as an athlete, even though, you realistically may know that someone's better than you, obviously you want to go out and prove on a national stage that you're better than Trevor Lawrence. So I think we're going to see the best performance of the entire year out of Justin Fields. I'm really excited. I don't know. This game is going to be tough. Like, I'm going to pick Clemson because I think Clemson is the better team, but Ohio State is going to give them a run for their money, right? Yeah. This is going to be a very close game. I can see this being like 38-35, coming down to a field goal or something like that, or one of these defenses is going to have to make a play, right? I think we've talked a lot about these offenses. Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, Rodgers, who is the Clemson's leading receiver, and then obviously Ohio State, Justin Fields, Travis Sermon, who's their leading running back, and then George Wilson, their leading receiver. Like, these offenses are stacked and loaded and can put up points almost at will. I think this game is going to come down to which defense is more consistently going to be able to hold the opponent's offense. And I'm not just talking about not giving up touchdowns, because that's going to be very difficult, but even just holding teams or holding one of these offenses to just field goals, I think is going to be huge. So whichever team can do that better, I'm going to give the advantage to. I like Clemson's defense a little bit more. I think they do some exotic blitzes and some things that can really kind of pressure a quarterback on the other side. Ohio State, I think they're a little more bland and vanilla as far as what they do. It's just they have great athletes, and they don't, even though Clemson does as well, Ohio State just they don't blitz a lot. They just like to play coverage, and they have to say our athletes are better than yours. And this situation with Clemson, who also gets 5-star athletes every recruiting class, you can't just sit back. So I want to see a more aggressive Ohio State defense. But at the end of the day, I'm picking Clemson. I think they just overall have a better team, but a close game and not a blowout, nothing like what we will more than likely see from Alabama and Notre Dame.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a fun game. I had Clemson win this one 45-38, winning by a touchdown. Hell, you might even see Ohio State with the ball last in this game. I just think Trevor Lawrence is going to find a way to win this game. I think, he's played a full season now. He even actually had a break in the middle with the COVID break, so you could call it. I can't remember if he actually dealt with COVID symptoms. But Trevor Lawrence is coming in here. He wants to prove he's the number one pick, and if this is potentially one of his last few games in college football, I think he wants to go out with a bang. So I got Trevor Lawrence winning this game for Clemson. I think he goes off. If you play daily fantasy football and you want to put some on that game, put Lawrence in your lineup for sure. Have him in there. But I think Lawrence finds a way. I just don't trust Ohio State. I don't trust Fields. He's in the Indiana game, he also threw 3 interceptions. Lawrence hasn't done anything like that this season. He really hasn't done anything that in his college career. So I had Clemson win that one. Then my prediction for the Alabama-Notre Dame game is a 48-17 Alabama blowout. That's how I'm going to go with that. I'm not going to put 50 on Notre Dame because college football playoffs. So
I will. I'll do it. I know.
I got Notre Dame scoring 2 touchdowns in this game, though. Can you believe it?
That's big.
It's big. No, it's
garbage time touchdowns.
So the good thing is the Alabama Notre Dame game will be the earlier game, so the nightcap will be Ohio State and Clemson. So get your popcorn ready. Start drinking during the Notre Dame Alabama game because you'll have to pay attention, and then so you're feeling good by the Clemson Ohio State game. I'm excited for that one. All right, Jared, we are coming to the end of the podcast here. I want you to give your favorite moment of the sports year in 2020. Could be anything, but just what's your big favorite memory from this year in 2020?
Man, that's a tough question, right? Because we've seen sports, entire leagues being postponed, being canceled, not knowing when they're going to play, players not having full off seasons to come back and really get themselves prepared physically. It's been a lot more mental work, being away from their families for a period of time, like the NBA was in the bubble. So it's obviously been a trying year for these athletes as well, as far as getting themselves ready to go out there and perform at their highest level. The first thing that comes to my mind, and I haven't really had a whole lot of time to think about this, so it would have to be in the NBA bubble and seeing the Lakers win the championship, right? Yeah. We've had a lot of discussions, and there's been so many discussions out there that the NBA bubble, there's an asterisk next to it, right? And whoever won the championship, and especially because it was the Lakers, and especially because it was LeBron James, it's an asterisk, and it wasn't that hard, and there was no true road game because you didn't have to go and play, against fans rooting against you and all that stuff, and that is true. But like I just mentioned, when these players were, away from their families for months at a time, right, could only talk to them via FaceTime and Skype, basically, and had to almost live in their hotel rooms because they couldn't, it's not like they could just go out to the local bar and grab a beer after the game and actually hang out. They actually still had to quarantine and get tested on a weekly basis. I believe it was 2 or 3 times a week they were getting tested. So it was just constant, nonstop basketball, and then go get tested, and then go back to your hotel room and eat hotel food for 3 months. So I think the strain that those teams took, and obviously the resiliency of the Lakers and the Miami Heat, who made it to the finals, was unbelievable. So for me, off the top of my head, I'm just going to say the Lakers, because of how difficult it was. And that's fine. You can put an asterisk next to the NBA bubble and the Lakers championship, but it better be because it was one of the most difficult championships to win, not because it was easier. So that would be one of my best moments of the 2020 sports world.
Yeah, I expected that, Jared. That was a big moment. Me as being an LA sports fan too, that was a cool moment. I got to celebrate with a lot of my friends. They were huge Lakers fans for that day too. It went all the way to 6 games, right? We were all prepared that game 5, so that was very exciting. I have an honorable mention I'm going to mention really quickly just before I say my favorite moment. My honorable mention is the DeAndre Hopkins Hail Mary catch, because now looking on it, Jared, we would be eliminated from the playoffs if that catch hadn't happened. So enough, the Cardinals, realistically, that Hail Mary has saved their playoff chances. But my favorite moment, Jared, there's a reason I'm wearing this hat today. It's my Los Angeles Dodgers finally winning the World Series. I'm going to go biased too. I think this, I think there's a lot of baseball fans out there that aren't Dodger fans that were excited to see the Dodgers finally win. It's a team that a lot of people have seen in the playoffs. It's a team that has a lot of likable guys like Mookie Betts and Corey Seager and Cody Bellinger and Clayton Kershaw. It was just so great to see Clayton Kershaw realistically finally get that championship, and just for the franchise. And you hear that Tommy Lasorda is in the hospital right now, and I'm just so glad that he got to witness our championship win this year. So there's a lot of great things. It was 2 weeks away from the Lakers win too, so the LA got to celebrate. They got it. LA, which has suffered a lot recently in COVID and a lot so far with COVID. It's nice that California and specifically Southern California and Los Angeles got to celebrate 2 championships in the middle of this coronavirus pandemic. So yeah, mine's got to be the Dodgers. I can't go without them. It practically made me cry. You guys have all seen the video when they won. So very exciting there. But yeah, my favorite moment of the Dodgers winning the World Series. But honorable mention, DeAndre Hopkins saving the Cardinals playoff chances. Maybe it'll be Chris Streebler on Sunday. You never know. Yeah, absolutely. So if you jumped in on this podcast or you wanted to see something specifically later in this podcast, go back to the beginning. We talked about the Clippers. We talked about the San Diego Padres acquisition of Blake Snell and possibly Darvish. We also discussed the NFL, Dwayne Haskins being released by Washington, and then the NFC and AFC playoff picture. And then we just went over the college football playoff matchups between Alabama and Notre Dame and Clemson and Ohio State. So thank you guys for watching. In 2020, we will be back in 2021. We will be discussing the NFL playoffs. And we will be discussing what happened in the college football playoff games, plus much, much more. Huge show coming at you in 2021, plus a bunch of other things that will be new to the Cover 2 podcast as well. I'll be announcing a little bit of those in about a week or two. So very, very interesting stuff going on with us. But this podcast is over. Once again, I am Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And we'll see you in 2021.
Happy New Year.